The golden sun poured over the hills of Judea as Jesus sat by the stone well, surrounded by eager faces seeking his words like thirsty earth seeks rain. Among them, a doctor of the law approached, his eyes gleaming with the cunning of one who believes he can challenge divine wisdom. "Master," he said, his voice echoing through the silent crowd, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus observed him with those eyes that seemed to see through the human soul, recognizing not only the question, but the intention behind it. The gentle breeze swayed the nearby olive trees, as if nature itself awaited the answer that would change hearts. "What is written in the law?" Jesus responded, returning the question with the gentleness of a father teaching his child to think. The man recited with pride, "You shall love the Lord your God, and your neighbor as yourself." Jesus nodded, but his eyes revealed that there was more to be discovered on that approaching afternoon. "You have answered correctly," said Jesus, his voice carrying the weight of eternity. "Do this and you will live." But the doctor of the law, feeling the heat of embarrassment rising up his neck, could not accept such a simple answer to a question he considered complex. He had studied for years, debated with the greatest sages, memorized infinite interpretations. How could salvation be so straightforward? He needed to justify himself, show his erudition, prove he deserved to be there, questioning the rabbi from Galilee. "And who is my neighbor?" he asked, his words cutting through the air like a sharp blade. The question echoed through the crowd, and Jesus could see in the surrounding faces the same doubt that had tormented the human heart since the beginning of time. Who deserves our compassion? Who falls within the circle of our moral responsibility? Jesus smiled, not a smile of superiority, but of deep understanding. He knew the answer would not come through theological definitions or philosophical debates. It would come through a story that would touch the soul of every person present. "A man," Jesus began, his voice taking on the hypnotic tone of the storyteller, "was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho." Immediately, everyone knew the danger. That road was known as the Bloody Way, winding for 17 miles through rocky gorges where bandits hid like vultures awaiting their prey. The man walked alone, perhaps out of urgent necessity, perhaps from excessive confidence in his own luck. Jerusalem, the holy city, lay behind with its golden temples and imposing walls. Ahead, Jericho awaited him with its palm trees and irrigated gardens, an oasis in the desert of life. But between holiness and refuge lay that shadowy valley where human nature revealed itself in its cruelest face. The traveler carried with him not only his belongings, but his hopes, his fears, his dreams of arriving safe and sound at his destination. He did not know he was about to become the protagonist of a lesson that would echo through millennia, teaching what it means to be truly human in an often unhumane world. "And he fell among robbers," Jesus continued, and a collective shiver ran through the crowd. Everyone could imagine the scene, the desperate cry echoing off the rocks, the muffled sound of blows, the noise of sandals on stone as the bandits fled with their cursed spoils. The man now lay in the dust of the road, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Half dead, what a terrible and precise expression. Not completely dead, so he could feel every stab of pain, every drop of blood that flowed, every labored breath that might be his last. His eyes, clouded by agony, could still see the blue sky above, could still hope for a miracle. His clothes, torn and stained, could no longer protect him from the scorching sun or the cold that would come with night. There he was, reduced to the most basic human condition, a suffering being, vulnerable, entirely dependent on the goodness of others. The road remained empty and silent, except for the low moan that escaped his parched lips, a wordless prayer directed to whoever might hear. Jesus paused, letting the image of the wounded man engrave itself in his listeners' minds. Then, with the mastery of one who knows the human heart deeply, he introduced the first character of the response. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road. A murmur crossed the crowd. A priest, representative of God, holy man, knower of the law, servant of the temple. If anyone should help, surely it would be him. The priest came from Jerusalem, perhaps after fulfilling his sacred duties, perhaps still carrying the scent of incense on his vestments, perhaps still echoing on his lips the words of psalms he had sung. He approached the place where the wounded man lay, his steps echoing confidently on the stone. But then, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Jesus' words fell like stones into the silent lake of collective conscience. Passed by on the other side, took a detour. Perhaps he muttered an excuse to himself. I might be contaminated with blood, or I have important commitments, or others will come who can help better. But he passed by, and the wounded man heard the footsteps fading away, taking with them the hope that had momentarily shone in his dying eyes. Likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place, Jesus continued, his voice taking on a darker tone. The Levites were the priest's assistants, knowers of the scriptures, men dedicated to religious service. If the priest had failed, perhaps the Levite would show more compassion. The wounded man, with the last threads of consciousness, must have felt a renewed glimmer of hope upon hearing new footsteps on the road. Perhaps his silent prayers had been heard. Perhaps this would be his salvation. The Levite came closer, and when he saw him, he also passed by on the other side. Again, those terrible words, passed by on the other side. Two holy men, two knowers of the law that commanded love of neighbor, two servants of God, and both chose indifference. Perhaps they justified their omission with elaborate theological arguments. Perhaps they quoted verses about ritual purity. Perhaps they convinced themselves they were acting correctly. But the man remained there, bleeding, alone, abandoned by the very representatives of that God who proclaimed himself Father of orphans and Defender of the defenseless. The road returned to silence, and the sun began its inexorable descent toward the horizon. Jesus let the silence weigh for a moment, allowing his listeners to absorb the bitterness of religious hypocrisy. Then, with a subtle change in tone of voice, he introduced the character who would transform the entire narrative. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was. A Samaritan! The word provoked visible reactions in the crowd. The Jews despised the Samaritans, considering them heretics, mixed race, false worshippers. They were the others, the outsiders, those who didn't even deserve to be greeted. If there was someone from whom compassion for a wounded Jew would not be expected, it would be exactly a Samaritan. But Jesus, with the wisdom of one who sees beyond the boundaries created by human prejudice, chose precisely this character to be the hero of his parable. The Samaritan was traveling the same dangerous road, perhaps on business, perhaps visiting relatives. Like the others, he too could have had his ready excuses. This man is my natural enemy. Or, his own people abandoned him. Why should I help? Or, I might be accused of having wounded him. But something different happened when he saw that battered body in the dust of the road. And when he saw him, he had compassion. Jesus pronounced these words with special tenderness, as if revealing the deepest secret of the human heart. Compassion. Not just pity, not just sympathy, but that visceral movement of the soul that makes us suffer alongside those who suffer, that breaks down all barriers and connects us in common humanity. The Samaritan made no calculations, weighed no pros and cons, consulted no conduct manuals. He saw a human being in agony, and his humanity responded instantly, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. With his own hands, he touched the repugnant wounds, cleaned the coagulated blood, poured the precious wine he carried to disinfect the cuts, used his own oil to soothe the pain. He had no sophisticated medical equipment, only what he possessed, but he gave everything he had. His clothes became stained, his hands got dirty, his perfume mixed with the odor of another's suffering. It didn't matter. Here was a human being needing help, and that was all that mattered in that sacred moment, where true compassion manifests in concrete action. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. Jesus described each gesture with care, painting the picture of a love that translates into practical and costly actions. The Samaritan didn't just provide first aid, he assumed total responsibility for the wounded man's recovery. He placed him on his own mount, while he himself walked on foot along the rocky road. Each step must have been painful for the wounded man, each movement an agony, but the Samaritan's strong arms supported him. His gentle voice encouraged him. His presence was the balm that healed not only the body, but the soul shattered by human cruelty. At the end, he didn't leave him in others' care. He himself became a nurse, staying awake during the night, watching the labored breathing, changing bandages, offering water to parched lips. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 2 denarii, the wages of 2 days of hard work. A significant amount for anyone, but especially generous coming from someone who owed nothing to that stranger, who, according to the social standards of the time, should actually consider him an enemy. And said to him, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." With these final words of the parable, Jesus revealed the radical depth of true love. The Samaritan not only gave what he had at the moment, he committed to the future, assumed unlimited responsibility. Whatever more you spend, a blank promise, a limitless check, a commitment that could cost much more than the initial 2 denarii. And then Jesus, with that penetrating gaze that reached the depths of the human soul, turned to the doctor of the law who had initiated that entire conversation. Which of these 3, do you think, proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? The question echoed in the silence, completely transforming the original question. The doctor had asked, "Who is my neighbor?" seeking limits, definitions, justifications for his selective indifference. Jesus inverted the question. It's not about identifying who deserves our love, but about becoming neighbors to those who need us. "The one who showed mercy toward him," the man responded, unable even to pronounce the word Samaritan. And Jesus, with a smile that carried all the world's hope, said, "You go and do likewise." Thus ended the parable that would forever change the definition of neighbor, transforming enemies into brothers through the transforming power of love in action. If this message touched your heart, please share with anyone who needs to hear this truth, and subscribe for more life-changing biblical teachings. Thanks for watching.